My name is Jeffrey Weidlinger, and I'm the director of the Raoul Wallenberg Institute. Thank you for making time on this, well, it says beautiful afternoon, but I wrote it in the morning. Thank you for braving today's storm to come out and to join us for this conversation. Welcome to our panelists, to the students here, particularly those who are taking the Ethnic and Religious Tolerance course. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank the staff of the Wallenberg Institute, particularly Joe Johnston, who is outside, and Eleanor Camp, who is over there with index cards that she'll be going around with a little bit later in our dialogue to take questions from all of you. This institute is named in honor of Raoul Wallenberg, a Michigan graduate from the class of 1935 who led the most successful rescue operation of Jews during the Holocaust and saved the lives of thousands of Hungarian Jews by using protective passports and sheltering families from deportation in safe houses throughout Budapest. The Institute, established just over a year ago, is dedicated to the study and promotion of ethnic and religious tolerance by fostering cross-cultural understanding, elevating civic discourse, and developing strategies to combat anti-Semitism, divisiveness, and discrimination of all kinds. The Samantha Woll dialogues are an integral part of this mission. These moderated discussions invite scholars and practitioners to share their expertise with the campus community, to showcase diverse opinions, and to model open and respectful dialogue. Samantha Woll was a proud graduate of the University of Michigan, where she distinguished herself as a passionate community leader from the beginning. She was a committed grassroots organizer, spearheading advocacy programs and events focused on women's rights, fair trade, labor rights, civil rights, refugee rights, the State of Israel, and much more. During her time here, Sam served in the Michigan Student Assembly, contributed as a news and editorial staff writer to the Michigan Daily, and represented students of the University of Michigan as a delegate to the Ann Arbor City Council. Her greatest impact, however, was felt through her unwavering dedication to building bridges across religious, ethnic, political, and community groups. Exactly 2 years ago today, on October 21st, 2023, at the age of 40, Sam was tragically murdered in Detroit. At the time of her passing, she was serving as president of the Isaac Agree Downtown Synagogue, a revitalized Jewish congregation in the heart of Detroit. Sam's influence, however, extended well beyond her own faith. She used her remarkable ability to listen and to unite individuals of diverse backgrounds and beliefs when she founded the Muslim Jewish Forum of Detroit in 2015. The Samantha Woll Dialogues carries forward her legacy by championing her values of tolerance, compassion, generosity, and humanity, and I'm particularly grateful to her family for being here today and for helping us make these dialogue series possible. Today's discussion, Should Hate Speech Be Regulated on Social Media, will examine the tensions between free expression and digital harm, and the ways that social media platforms, policymakers, and communities are navigating this evolving landscape. Universities, and particularly public institutions like our own, have unique roles to fulfill, not only in educating and empowering the next generation, but also in serving as a marketplace of ideas where diverse viewpoints and perspectives can be freely expressed, evaluated, and critiqued. I will take this opportunity, therefore, to remind you all that the university's deep commitment to freedom of expression does not extend to the right to substantially disrupt or interfere with the lawful speech of others. You all have index cards available, or will have available when Eleanor goes around to distribute them in about 40 minutes or so. And we'll collect them then to guide the second part of our discussion. And now, I would like to introduce our moderator for this afternoon, Dr. Miriam Mora, who is the managing director of the Raoul Wallenberg Institute, a scholar of U.S. immigration and ethnic history, gender and masculinity, genocide studies, and the Holocaust, as well as the author of Carrying a Big Shtick, Jewish Acculturation and Masculinity in the 20th Century. And Dr. Mora will now join us and introduce the other panelists. So thanks.
you. Why don't you two come up on the stage while I'm introducing. Thank you, everyone, for coming today and braving the weather, the sideways rain I saw on the way in. We're very fortunate to have these guests with us today to discuss something that is always on our minds and in our discussions these days, the regulation or lack of regulation of speech on social media. Our guests today are Roy Austin Jr. and Paul Resnick. Roy is an attorney who's held several prominent positions in the federal government, including positions with the U.S. Justice Department Civil Rights Division, White House Domestic Policy Council, the President's Task Force on 20th Century Policing, and President Obama's My Brother's Keepers Task Force. Previously, he was Meta's Vice President of Civil Rights and Deputy General Counsel. He is now the inaugural director of Howard University's School of Law's Artificial Intelligence Initiative. The initiative's mission is to develop artificial intelligence solutions that advance civil and human rights, justice, fairness, and the rule of law. Paul Resnick, coming from much closer, is the Michael D. Cohen Collegiate Professor of the School of Information here at the University of Michigan. From 2018 to 2025, he directed the Center for Social Media Responsibility, whose mission is to help social media platforms meet their public responsibilities. The center publishes metrics tracking attention to content from iffy sources and the prevalence of hateful, offensive, and/or toxic speech across platforms and over time, and tracking the performance of X's community note system for crowdsourced responses to misinformation. In 2021 and 2022, he led an NSF-funded project to devise ways for platforms to perform content moderation with greater public legitimacy. He co-authored a 2012 MIT Press book titled Building Successful Online Communities, Evidence-Based Social Design. Our subject for this event grew out of audience questions at our dialogues over the last year, so many of which concerned the role of social media in our society and how it changes our lives and relationships on and off screen. I thought we'd begin with the most basic, or perhaps the hardest question: should hate speech be regulated on social media? And I'm going to start by asking Paul, and in your answer, please also give us a bit of background of your own work and how you came to your opinion on this question of regulation.
Thank you. So the question of should hate speech be regulated brings up the question of what do we mean by regulation. And I find it very helpful to think of this in terms of a framework that Larry Lessig, a law professor, provided back in the late 1990s. He had an article called What Things Regulate Speech. And the first thing we think of is rules, laws. Not allowed to do this. And those could be, given to us by a government, or it could be Meta imposing rules. But he also identified three other things that effectively regulate what gets said. One is norms, another is economic incentives, and the third is technological affordances. And they're all quite powerful at adjusting what it is that people say and what people see. So, if we're thinking about regulating speech, I like to think about all of those. I come, from a more technology background, and a lot of technologists are sort of on the libertarian side. We like free markets, we like free speech, we like social processes rather than, and I'm not all the way there, but I am at least sympathetic to the idea that we should try real hard to make use of the social norms, the economic incentives, and the technological affordances before we start imposing rules from external rules coming either from the platforms or from government.
Roy?
Yeah, so Larry Lessig was a professor of mine, and you don't know Larry Lessig. No, I'm joking. Look, the answer to the question is yes, period. I think we've done here because that's it. Of course social media needs to be regulated. Of course it will be regulated. I think there are a number of entities that will regulate it over time. Look, the worst of the worst, government is going to regulate. You take child harm at its worst. We can talk about right now where those lines are drawn. You can talk terrorism. Those lines will be drawn. You can talk fraud, commercial fraud. Those lines will be drawn. I think that the harder question is on slurs and hate speech. That's where it becomes a little more difficult. Can you say whatever you want to about an individual? Can you say whatever you want to about a group? Every platform has its rules, how you interact with that platform, and that's largely how it should be, because government just can't do this well. So the answer is yes.
And maybe a little bit more about your experiences that have led you to that stance.
Well, my experience is, as a longtime hate crimes prosecutor and someone who has really seen the worst of the worst that human beings can do to other human beings, is that words matter. And what we say to each other, what we say about each other, diminishes the value of a human being to another human being. Incredibly. I mean, we go all the way back to the slave times and black people being seen as animals. We go to what we're seeing right now in immigration and immigrants being seen as subhuman. We go to the Holocaust and how individuals, Jewish individuals were viewed. It was the removal of their humanity, and the largest way that we removed humanity was through words. And the words then led to action. And we cannot allow people to do that to fellow people if we're going to have a civilized society. So we cannot just, and look, we see it on social media every day to the extent that these laws even exist. We cannot just leave this to people to do, because people will do awful things to fellow people. And we just can't continue down this road for much longer. And so, what I saw was a real hard attempt to try to say what can and cannot be on Meta's platforms through our community standards. And it's a hard thing to do. But you draw lines and you stick to those lines, and people then can walk away from that platform if they choose not to be there. If you don't want to be on Facebook, then go to X. If you don't want to be on X, go to Reddit. If you don't want to be on Reddit, then go on the street corner and yell what you want to yell. But you don't have any constitutional right, to be on a platform saying the worst things that you want to say.
So in what ways do the existing laws address or fail to address the responsibilities of those social media companies themselves in moderating content that could be considered harmful to personal relationships or public discourse or American politics?
So, a very poor job. A very poor job. I mean, we see right now harm to young people happening, and I mean very young people happening on social media, which should be a bipartisan issue. But we have a Congress that cannot move, even on that issue. I mean, you can get, the head of a social media company to turn around and apologize, but you can't come up with a true law that defines when you're talking about harm to children. You have states trying to step into this void, and you have a Congress that is willing to give a 10-year exemption to social media companies and AI companies to do whatever they want to do technologically, which is honestly one of the silliest things that I've ever heard. You make laws to make laws. You don't make laws to prevent people from making laws. And that's where we are right now. So they do an awful job on the things that are actually what most of us would think are the easiest things. So now we step into the stuff that's actually hard. And you have people who aren't doing it because they've decided that it's right or wrong, but they do it because it allows them to maintain power. And that shouldn't be what we're talking about here as a society, as a country, as a world, how to maintain power. It should be, how do we do the most and the best for all of our people? Everyone who is born here, everyone who has an opportunity to live here. And we don't even come close to having laws and governments that can do that. So we're stuck in this place where it's left to a bunch of very, 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 let me say again, very wealthy individuals to make these choices for all of us. And that's unfortunate, and it's time for us, meaning people, meaning well-meaning people, to create the social media that we want and to choose to use that social media and to not keep feeding the pockets of those who are giving us social media that we don't want.
So I agree with your assessment of the current regulatory environment. We have regulations about terrorist material and child sexual exploitation material, which we have pretty wide societal consensus about those and pretty clear law enforcement to deal with those. It's illegal to have them, it's illegal to distribute them, everything's illegal about it, right? But everything beyond that, the government has thrown up its hands and says, we're not regulating, it's up to the platforms, it's up to let the consumer beware. So I agree with that assessment of the state. I may be less with you on, it seems like you're implying that the place we should go is we should have more regulation of these other things that we don't have quite as clear lines on of how hateful is too hateful. And I'm worried about that government processes for deciding those things won't come out very well. And we'll end up with things that are, where the cure is worse than the disease. So I'm worried there. I think even with the platforms making these clear lines of, okay, that's too hateful, that's just on the other side, and that's going to be allowed. I like better something that is more continuous. So you were at Meta, I went briefly as a consultant there. They have this framework of what can we do when we discover something that's against our community guidelines. And they have 3 kinds of actions they take. Reduce, remove, or inform. I guess they have more than that. Like they also have kick the person off. But the remove is this content will be removed. No one will get to see it. So that's sort of the most extreme. Reduce is they're sorting and ranking things all the time and recommending. So when you go on there, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you might be interested, but way more than you're going to ever spend time looking at all of it. So they're always recommending things, sorting things, and through that process, they can choose to give boosts to some things and reduce other things. And then inform is they can attach little messages like X does with their community notes. It might be helpful for you to know that this video that was posted as being taken last month at a protest was actually taken 5 years ago and was in a movie. They'll add that as a little informing note. So remove, reduce, and inform. I'm a big fan of the reduce. Most people don't want to see this hateful stuff. It's really hard to decide exactly how far is too far. So if it's really far, let's reduce a whole lot. And if we think it's kind of far, let's reduce it some. And I have tried to convince folks at Meta that this ought to be the kind of way to approach it. But instead of saying we have a definition that if you say this thing, it's allowed, and if you say this other thing, it's not allowed, we put it to community judgment. And if 90% of the people think this is too hateful, reduce it by 90%, or maybe not exactly, but by something that's scaled to the fraction. If 40% of the people think it's too hateful, reduce it by somewhat less. And so rather than getting things that are at this sharp dividing line of okay and not okay, you get things that are more and less bad, and the things that are more bad get reduced by more.
Let's engage on this one, because the whole reducing thing, to me, is impractical. And you do it, and we at Meta did it, but it's impractical because what you're doing is you're saying, this speech right here is really awful and harmful, but 5% of the people like it, so let's feed them more of that. 95% of the people don't like it, so we're not going to show them that, but we're going to get away from the removal by this little game we're going to play, which is let me create an echo chamber for you who likes to sit in this filth. No speech. And that's what you end up doing. And so the people who are ready, kind of on edge, over the edge, are getting more and more of this fed to them because, look, ultimately it's about engagement. So I don't want to take it away completely because I may lose some users. Oh my God, they can't use that awful slur, so I might lose them, which means I'm going to lose money, which, oh goodness, $1 trillion is not quite enough. So my concern is that we're still making the same judgments. We're still making these, and go ahead and survey people on Facebook, on anything. And you're not getting a real survey of what people think. There's no way to survey 4 billion users across every race, religion, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, and state of disability. There's no way to do it. And so who are we measuring it for? And then how do you put that in practice? Are we talking about Ann Arbor values, which I'd say are lower than State College, Pennsylvania values, but that me being from State College, I'll just throw that in there. Or Northwestern values because my daughter's there. So, but Ann Arbor values do mean something to some people. But I'm saying, but do we geocode everything? And then let's take the world. So much of Europe has very strong anti-hate crime language, hate speech language. They have very low anti-nudity language. We in the United States are the opposite on that. But who are we building these systems for? Are we building these systems for the world? Are we building these systems for each community? And then each community then just sits in its own echo chamber of the majority voices, and majority voices really being the loudest voices in those communities. So I get it from an academic standpoint, the idea of, well, we're not going to remove it, but we're just going to make it appear less. But the practicalities of it are really brutal.
Okay. May I engage with it? Or
No. I spoke and you can't say anything else.
I was asking Miriam, but
Our boss.
So there's a lot going on there. First of all, there's another reason for saying we're going to let this stay on here on the platform and serve it only to the people who want it, to the extent that we can do that well. And you said it's so they can make more money. But there's another reason, which is so that you don't have to make a centralized decision for everybody. And the things that are easy to decide, it's okay. But the things that are more controversial, leaving room for there to be disagreement is going to be better than making a central choice. Then the question is, do we want to let the community fragment? And I think you're going to maybe get to that later, so I'll save the fragmentation discussion. I think you're also suggesting that it might just be really hard to do this well, and that we'll get it wrong, and sometimes the stuff that only a few people wanted to see will leak out. And is that part of your argument about that it's really hard to do, or?
A little bit. Like the leaking out is less of my concern because most people who don't want to see it are going to ignore it anyway. But it's more the people who want to see it. And look, the line I draw is a pretty broad line. I mean, if we're disagreeing about tax policy or whether capital markets should operate in a certain way or even basic gun control, I'm fine with that. But if we're talking about whether or not I can call, and each of you go to your gender, your ethnicity, your race, your whatever, that someone's allowed to call you that name online or in your DMs, I don't need that. And I don't think we need that. I don't think any platform needs that. So when we're talking about hate speech at that level, I don't think it needs to be there. There's an issue right now at Meta where they're training their AI. And for any of you who don't know this, the AI is trained. Okay, it's not magic. It's not just going out there and figuring out the best answer. And if you go to Claude versus Meta AI versus Copilot versus Grok versus any of the others, you're getting something that someone has engineered. So Meta engineered to say, if someone asks, are black people dumber than white people, to provide the answer, yes, they are. Because black people score less highly on IQ tests. Now, as far as I'm concerned, and if you ask Claude, if you ask others, they'll say the same answer, that should not be on social media. That should not be the answer that is given. So take your race, your ethnicity, or whatever, take the worst stereotype about you. Should social media allow people to say that about you online? And my answer is no. It actually shouldn't. Now, I don't think government can figure this out, and we're seeing that right now. But I think the social media companies should have a responsibility, even if it reduces the use.
So jumping off of the responsibility of the social media companies and this idea of the echo chambers that are created by user-driven, clicking, because this is a privatized, profit-driven framework that we're all interacting with on social media, these incentives are for attention, right? They're for clicking, they're for continuing to use the AI model, continuing to ask these questions, and that, of course, all feeds on stock value. So how can we as a society navigate this tension between moderating the content that comes out of these tools and that's promoted through these algorithms on social media, and moderating hate through that and driving user attention, knowing that that moderation is going to constantly decrease profit?
I'm more optimistic than that. I don't think that the moderation has to decrease profit. Most of the time, most people don't want to hear that. They don't want to see that, and it actually drives people away from the platform. So now what does help is when they get outraged, and that gets them engaged. That keeps them on. It might make them eventually stop using it, but it definitely keeps them on during that session. But I think the challenge is, how do you, as the social media platform, how do you find the stuff that's as engaging, that isn't outrage-driven? And so, now the story is we get nothing but outrageous stuff. But the story used to be, oh, you can't get anything good on social media. All you get is kitten videos and puppy videos. And what is everybody complaining about this new Sora thing where people are making these little videos? It's not that, well, there's some concerns about, there's all kinds of concerns. But the real thing that's happening is people are making stuff that's just entertaining and slop. That it's not somehow uplifting us. It's not giving us the best of ourselves. It's not challenging us to learn things, to connect with other people, all of those things. But we're, as humans, all of those things appeal to us in different ways. And there are times when, you see the incredible video of the biker gang and the black activists shouting at each other and end up hugging each other at the end. And those are engaging too. And so that's what we need to do, is figure out the algorithms that are going to engage us in the ways that are the best of ourselves and not the worst of ourselves.
I mean, I agree that it should be. Profit should not, like you could actually make a profit, an enormous profit, without dealing in hate speech. But I'm looking at people, and the FOMO is real. Like, people want FOMO for those. I saw some people looking around. There's some who are like, yeah, obviously FOMO. Fear of missing out, for those of you from a generation around mine. it's like if you're not in the middle of these awful conversations, you're like missing out on something. And I think honestly, if the social media companies believed that they could make similar profit without that stuff, they would take that stuff off. But there's this real desire to see the worst in humanity. And oh goodness, when you put up something, the one I often looked at a lot, just because it's something that I care about deeply, is like women's sports. And the number of awful trolling comments that you would get from men on those posts was painful for me to see. I coach a girls' youth soccer team, along with have a daughter who's an athlete. It was absolutely devastating to see that. In my opinion, that stuff should have been taken down. Like the company should, it wasn't a debate. It was just demeaning. And again, I know I sound like I'm all for censorship, and I'm not. Let's have debates about things that we should have debates about. But when we're putting people down, and the thing is that I'm sitting there saying, yeah, oh, we age gate this. Well, we don't. So a 12-year-old female athlete is going to look at this stuff. She's going to see these demeaning comments, and what's that going to do to her life decisions as to whether or not she wants to be engaged in sports? But again, I move this to anyone. Again, take your faith, take your race, take your ethnicity. When you read those things and you see people demeaning you on the basis of those things, your immutable characteristics, what does that do to you? And that's why I want it removed. And I do think if they thought that they would make the same profit without it, they would take it off. But they actually think they want it because it makes more profit, because people love to sit there and just scroll through the comments. Oh, just wait till you see the comments on this person who looks like that. And it's really kind of just, it's awful. And I wish let me not over-moralize. I can't say I haven't done it myself and I haven't smiled and snickered inappropriately. But I don't need that. And I don't need that on social media.
You want to respond?
Well, I haven't tested this, but I read something that said something that's changed recently in the YouTube comments. YouTube used to be like a classic case of there's a video and then there's comments, and the comments are all of the type that you're talking about. And apparently they did something in their algorithm now, like now all the comments are, oh, what a beautiful story. I'm so glad you shared that with us, and you've changed my life, and thank you so much. Keep posting, and it's almost like it's an AI sycophant is always telling you that your question is great. So now I don't know to what extent did they really do that for all of YouTube, or were they just testing this out, But somehow somebody thought that, well, maybe we don't have it right yet. Maybe we're not maximizing profit yet. Maybe we should try giving people things that make them feel good instead of, make them feel like the world's a terrible place.
Yeah, I mean, this is the line drawing in the hard part, and that is you have both sides of this. I mean, at some level, I wish that AI would tell people, no, that's really a stupid question, actually. Like, just say it.
Not mine.
and just tell people, ooh, that one, yeah, you just don't say that one publicly, because you will be shamed for it. As opposed to every question, every piece of writing, you put a little piece of writing in there. Oh, that's so brilliant. Let me give you a couple suggestions on how to make it just a little bit better. But I don't know what that line is, but there needs to be a line. Because yes, you don't want to go too far one way. No, you also don't want to go too far the other. But truly, I mean, some of them will be very blunt. So my
point is just that they are playing around with the algorithm. They decided like maybe what we were giving people in the comments, and they're not deleting all those other ones. They just put them so far down that nobody reads them. They see the top 30, and so yeah.
So jumping off of AI then, and perhaps a more positive use of AI, I'm wondering how and if, because this isn't so much my area, emerging technologies like AI, and specifically AI content moderation, might impact the legal interpretations of free speech and moderation in these social media platforms.
I got lots to say about how AI might help with content moderation, but nothing to say about it, how it might affect legal interpretations. I'm going to leave that to the lawyer on the panel.
I mean, here's the problem again, is that it's all engineered. So how will it? It will impact it the way the companies want it to be impacted, is how it's going to impact legal interpretation. It's going to take things and it's going to say that this is the legal interpretation that you should accept here because this is the one that benefits us as a company. Again, these are not objective statements of truth, not even close to it. And so, my concern again is AI right now, unfortunately, just like everything else in the world, is about money and power. That's all it's about. And the people with the money and the people with the power are the ones who get to decide what you see, when you see it, and how you see it. So they're going to do the same thing with legal interpretation. We're seeing that right now with the court. When you're at a situation where every single time you read a court case and a court opinion, the first thing you look to is that a Republican-appointed judge or a Democratic-appointed judge, you've lost the rule of law. And that's where we are right now. The rule of law is deeply meaningless when all that matters is who is doing the deciding. AI, again, because the people aren't in charge, because common sense isn't in charge, because truth isn't in charge, is simply the powerful deciding how they want, and more so how they want answers. If democracy works and the people are truly voting based on their experience and their knowledge and truthful information, then we could fix AI. But until that is done, we're in a bad place. So that's on the legal. I'm just concerned that it's not going to help because the answers are going to be what they want the answers to be.
Paul, do you want to speak to the technical side?
Well, I think what Roy's alluding to is that we train the AI, right? You give it some inputs, and it gives you an output, and you say, nope, that one wasn't right. Those three were right. And then, rinse and repeat until it's matching on the training set the kinds of examples, the kind of answers that it's supposed to produce. So it just begs the question of what did we want on our training set the answers to be, and that's going to be whatever the lawyers in that you ask, or the judges, or whatever you set up as the journalists that you hire to assess misinformation, or my favorite approach, the sort of deliberative poll, where you have the citizenry, and you give them time to be informed, and you let them make judgments, and that would give us some ground truth decisions that have more public legitimacy, and you train on those, and then you accept the decisions that come out, at least as tentative decisions on everything else that you haven't trained on. You keep using the AI, and whenever you need to, there's an appeals process, and it comes back, and you go to another citizen jury.
I want to not always be negative, by the way. I do have fun in life, just in case some of you are wondering. And I'm not always angry. But I love the citizen jury. And I love that because the one time I found that we can actually make progress is we bring people from different worlds together in a small group, closed room, and they have a chance to really understand each other, where the cameras are off, where everything they say isn't made immediately public. Can that be created in the world of social media decision-making, such that we don't have to, outdo the other in how loud or angry we are, to actually get to real decisions that people care about deeply?
Yes.
How?
The same way you do it outside of the technical world. You convene people, you set up the structures of the discussion, you give them some power so that they feel like their discussions matter. And the power that I'm suggesting they have is that they're getting to decide on, was this thing something that should get downranked, or if you have your way, is this something that should be removed? And you can, you can set it up in a way. You can have a facilitator. You can have a briefing book. You can do it in a way that where people feel comfortable. All the things we try to do in our classrooms when we have a controversial topic, and we try to say, okay, we're going to have certain rules of the discussion, and you're not allowed to call each other names. And I'm all for that kind of thing in a group of 12 people. Which is different from saying we want it for the public statements that people are just making out in social media.
But don't we have to scale that? Because you get to a level of respect with fellow human beings. You get to a level of understanding. Give them that control and that power to move that lever, in your case, up or down on how much people see it. In my case, remove or keep up. But give people, and this is where diversity matters, all kinds of diversity matters, give people that power in a smaller setting where they're actually being honest and forthright as opposed to, whoever can be the most awful online. Scale it. That's what I'm saying. I think we could scale that.
I'm going to ask one more question myself, a positive one, before we delve into the audience questions here, which is, it's a question based on something that we've gotten a lot in previous conversations here, which is how can we, as individuals, in judging by your experiences from the technological side and immersed in it from the legal side, be better social media users? So better engage with these technologies so as not to become siloed and to become educated and engage in a responsible and productive way.
As individuals, notice when you're getting outraged and train the platforms not to give you that stuff. So you have a lot of control over what you receive by which things you comment on, which things you like, which things you forward. If you spend a lot of time replying to the things that outrage you, you'll keep getting more things that outrage you. So that would be my suggestion. Pay attention to where the outrage is and stop giving it your attention.
I just think, and this is hard, but you just have to stop using the social media that isn't being responsible. All they care about are clicks and views and uses. And again, I know the FOMO is real. I know that everybody wants to be there. They want to see what that latest thing is on whatever that channel is. But the only way they're going to hear you, because remember, most of these it's ad revenue. And ad revenue is about how many people have eyes on their advertisement. And so the only way is a collective action decide that you want something better. Find that thing that is better. That's something that I'm trying to build right now. We'll see. It's going to take time, and so I'm not telling you to go there yet. It's not there, and it may not be good at the end of the day. But the real thing is as long as you keep using it, they're going to keep feeding it to you. And it's like, and it's like recycling. You're sitting there. Should I throw this piece of paper in this one, or this can in this one, or this one? Every little bit that you throw in the right can helps. Every time you stop using it, it's helping. It may feel little, but it's helping.
I guess I'll just offer the confession that I don't use social media anymore.
That's the right way.
No, I mean, I sort of, I did use it quite a bit, Facebook and Twitter primarily, and then the pandemic came, and I was getting outraged all the time, and I kind of took my own advice and said, I guess this isn't working for me, and I haven't really gone back, which is a little bit sad because there were a lot of things in the period, 1997 to 2020 that I got a lot of good things from it. I connected with all my old high school friends, and there were online communities. I used to teach a class about online communities and the amazing things that they did to bring people together who weren't physically near each other. I did a bunch of research projects where we found lots of positive examples of people making connections across ideological barriers, all kinds of good things. Yeah, the big platforms, X, Reddit, all of them, I sort of had to find it wasn't good for me.
You're a stronger human being than I am. I have not given it up, but I've deleted some accounts, moved to other places, but it's really reaching a point where I'm close to giving some of it up because it's so much slop. You can't look at anything and know whether it's real or not, even things that are as basic as like something that they say happened in sports. You're like, oh, wow. And then you like look back and like, no, that didn't happen. And you get tired of not being able to live life, just like knowing if I read a very basic piece of information that it's truthful or not. And it does get tiring and annoying. And so it's getting harder, but I'm still on a few.
I'm still optimistic. A day's going to come when it's going to be good again, and I'm going to go back.
When I build it, yeah.
Yes, there we go.
I'll invite you.
Yeah, I'll be there.
There's a lot of, I see a lot of questions here from our audience about asking for some more clarity on who actually does the hate speech moderation. So this is getting a little bit in the weeds, but some of the kind of themes that are coming up are who makes these decisions about what hate speech is across different platforms. And I'll tack a few of your other questions on there as well. Is one platform substantially better than another in your opinions, in terms of moderating hate speech? And I'll add one more in there. Do you think that more actual hate speech gets flagged than random non-hate speech gets flagged as hate speech? So in the weeds of how this actually happens on these platforms. Roy.
So you have what are called, for Meta, you have something called the Community Risk Standards. And I recommend to you an article from Reuters. Talks about the 200 pages of community risk standards that they just put out. And that's where that one example I brought you, and that was on sensualizing children, was the headline of the article, where Meta backtracked and said, oh, no, we never should have said that, even though their engineers, legal, policy, chief ethicist all said that was fine when they put it out there. And this was the one that also said that black people, you go ahead and say black people are dumber than white people. You literally go through and you red team. You think of the worst thing, and it's actually kind of fun because you can do it at work, is think of the worst thing that you ever wanted to say on social media, and you say it, and then you put it in, and then you see the answer, and then you evaluate that answer, and then exactly as you were saying, you say, okay, this answer's all right, this answer's not all right. So you do that with hate speech. You put in hate speech, you see what answer it gives, and then you, being your group of people, sit there and decide, is that hate speech or not? Should it be allowed on the platform or not? And then you train your model to answer in the way that you've asked it to answer, and then you keep fine-tuning that as you get more and more answers. That's how it works. Again, that's why I want to make it clear it's not magic. This is human beings who are actually making these decisions as to what is the line between hate speech and not hate speech. So that's how it is currently done. And then you reduce it or you remove it based on how much you think it's hate speech. And then as far as, look, the vast majority of stuff that is on social media is not hate speech. I think we're getting to a point where the vast majority of it is fake, but the vast majority of it is not hate speech. You have a tiny amount that's hate speech, but the hate speech gets amplified because it gets enormous engagement online. So I think that answers most of those questions.
I just want to clarify one piece of this. So you got your lawyers and policy experts in a room, and they're deciding on changes in this 200-page document that is trying to, define the lines. This is okay. That's not okay. The way you described it is, then there's an algorithm that's going to be trained that's going to go make all the decisions. Have they really gone to fully automating that with an algorithm? Or because in the era when I was consulting for Facebook, they had a zillion contract employees who just sat all day getting fed one thing after another, often the grotesque images and things like that, and they had to make yes or no decisions. And there's been a lot of discussion of like, what kind of trauma is that doing to the people who have that job? Have they gotten rid of those jobs and just trusted the automated models now, or are they still using a lot of contractors?
Let me be very careful not to speak for where the company is at this moment. I left at the end of March. It was, the first cut was often being done by AI. So the first cut would be done by AI, and then you give it to these human beings. And this is actually, it was unbelievable to actually experience this because it is so hard. And that is, once you get that first cut, then you're given the piece of material, and then you as a human being have to say, should this stay up, should this come down? And sometimes you're given full context, and some of it, it's isolated, it's on an island, and you're trying to make those calls. And it is the hardest thing in the world to do, and you're supposed to do it at a certain speed. And asking people to make these really hard judgments at a certain speed, they're going to make mistakes. The AI is going to make mistakes. The AI is going to miss stuff. Like take again that worst slur, and everyone now, let's just throw an asterisk where that letter would have been, and then we put the slur in there. Or let's write it backwards. Or as some musician just came up with a new slur that no one understands, and we're trying to keep up with that. And so it's incredibly hard, and people come up with coded language, and so you're constantly chasing it. But the first cut is often done by AI because of the volume. Again, 4 billion active users across Meta's platforms. There are 8 billion people in the world. Half of the world is using it. Facebook is to social media what Kleenex is to most of us. It is just the brand name for everything internet. So this is enormous. And so you have to also think different languages, you have to think regions, you have to think all of those things. And so AI hasn't figured it out yet to do it on its own. So you do have people who are sitting there making these judgments at high speed as they're going through these things, and oftentimes looking at horrific image after horrific image, and now many of those images are computer generated.
So I'll just say, part of the reason I'm worried about this process of imposing rules for things that are borderline is that you get so that there's this 2-stage thing, or 3-stage, right? You have the policy people in your DC office or in Menlo Park who are making this 200-page rule book.
Oh, we moved them to Texas because that's going to be more fair. You didn't see that announcement?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Texas. So you got people making the rule book. Then you're training the algorithm to try to do that, and then you have the humans who are looking at the ones that the algorithm has surfaced. And in practice, you get problems that there are unintended consequences of whatever rules came in here as interpreted through this process that makes some errors. And you have gay and lesbian advocacy groups saying, hey, your stuff is actually censoring us in our legitimate ways of talking. You've got a lot of marginalized groups who are saying, hey, this stuff was supposed to protect us? That's not how it's working. It's actually silencing us. And that may be coming from, okay, we didn't understand some of the ways that the communities are using some of these words, and so we got our playbook wrong, or it can happen downstream in the AI making decisions or the humans making the decisions. But just in practice, we don't do so well with it. And that's even before you get to the controversies of people that there are legitimate disagreements about what the rules ought to be.
I mean, let's make this a finer point. He's absolutely right. Okay, one of my earliest days at Meta, someone wrote me and said, this person is calling someone else the N-word. Should we take it down? And my first question was, well, who's calling who what? And all of you know in your communities, you call each other awful things, but you've turned it into a word of empowerment. whatever community you belong to. Women do this, LGBTQ people do this. You take a word that becomes empowering. So the N-word, if you take rap music just as an example, has become empowering as well as it is derogatory. So if you could set up an algorithm that says anytime the N-word is there, remove it. You're actually going to take away a bunch of the language of the black community if you do that. So who was saying it is the other thing you have to ask, and then why are they saying it? And what it turned out was it was one female rapper saying this to a male rapper as a term of endearment. Get your algorithm to figure that one out, okay? How do I know who's saying it to whom, in what context to get it there? So,
Or your $12 an hour moderator in Ecuador, who's getting these.
exactly.
We got a few questions that kind of jump off of that about the negatives to condemning or removing hate speech, right? Like, for example, driving the people who are putting out the most hate speech into even more dramatic echo chambers or other platforms where their ideas are not moderated. So are there any other kind of negatives you'd want to highlight to moderating those hateful ideas?
I think your questioner has already raised those concerns. Doesn't bother me that much if the haters want to leave the platform that I'm on and go somewhere else, far away from me. That would be okay.
Is there a benefit then to having them on, say, Meta, to having these people in kind of a larger conversation?
So, I mean, sure. The people who are reformable are more likely to reform if they're around other people who are and this is where the social norms come in, who are saying, oh, that's not really how I would say it, because that's kind of offensive, and people do adjust to that. Not everybody does, but many people do.
That shame. If shame even existed anymore. We see this recent controversy right now over some of the awful things that were said online and what people thought were a private chat, and how many people just sat there allowing that to go forward. It's allowed now. So, what is the point of giving people a platform for that if it's not going to change behavior? I think what we have to start out with, and the hardest question is what kind of a society do we actually want to live in? I think that's the thing. And yeah, everything is going to be balancing. Everything's going to be line drawing. Are we going to give up a little bit of speech to live in a place that's a little kinder? And I think that's the question we as a community somehow have to answer. But right now, people can say anything they want to about anyone else, and there are very few repercussions to doing that. So why give people more spaces to say awful things about other people is my opinion. And does really, like, telling someone you can't call someone a slur, does that really make them more dangerous than allowing them to do it in the wide open? I don't know about that. I don't subscribe to that.
So what do you see as a social media platform that is ideal for the future? Do you think there is one, or are all of these spaces automatically kind of imbued with all of this with all these negative repercussions for society? Paint us a picture.
You're building one. It's going to be great. Tell us about it.
It's going to be amazing. No, I mean, it's really going to operate off of the model that you talked about and that I really believe in, and I think that has to be scaled. And that is, how do I bring diverse people into a room to answer these hard questions and make it move fast? Meta has something called the Oversight Board, which is a great idea. It's a group of outside individuals who rule on Meta's content, kind of Meta Supreme Court. The problem is that they're too slow and they don't deal with enough stuff, and things happen so fast. So how do I create a smaller group that is instantaneously able to provide answers to these questions, that is able to then build a social media platform that does that, who truly, when you go on it, I mean, one thing, you talk about inform, and this is actually kind of sad, is informing is the other thing. You can remove, reduce, inform. So you tell people, hey, this isn't true. What we found is when you tell some people that something isn't true, they're like, oh, that's the meta conspiracy. They're trying to keep good information from me. So that's the stuff I really got to read and pass off to more people. So the informing doesn't necessarily work. But if people trust the person doing the informing, will they actually accept that? Because you can't move fast enough to catch all of these things. Sometimes you are going to have to come back around and inform people later. So the idea is there one right now? I don't know, because I haven't tested them. I know that Claude talks about being, by Anthropic, talks about being really the socially conscious AI. I don't know if I would say that they're there yet, but honestly, you should all do your own testing. Think about the worst possible things, ask the question of a bunch of different ones, see what kind of answers they're giving, how complete the answer is, how cited the answer is, and use that to make your own decision as to where you want to be to the extent you use social media. You're going to get the same, you're going to do the same thing on all your papers anyway at the end of the day with whichever one you use.
Well, it sounds like you're giving advice about using LLMs or these chatbots, which is related to, but not the same as the social media platform. But I mean, I go back to the visions that we had and that we started to see of beautiful things that happened when people came together as strangers on the internet. I once had a job where our group, we said, this was 1996, is we make the internet, we make it safe, fun, and profitable to interact with strangers. That was the vision. And there were amazing things that happened. Like, we all came together as a society and made Wikipedia. The most amazing encyclopedia ever, and we did that with not people getting paid and very few rules, and people came and edited each other, and somehow it was organized in a way that we came out with a good knowledge product in the end. We had
But now you have Grokkapedia, because Elon Musk says that that's biased to the left, and so he's going to create his own for all those non-believers.
Yeah, okay. Maybe there was room for improvement, but it was an amazing collective action. You had people creating these flash mobs, just for fun. Everyone would show up at some subway station and start dancing at 1 p.m. And there were things that we were able to do together. There was, and you can still find some subreddits where the conversation is good, and people are figuring out what they think about things, and so the internet's a big place, and there's lots of rays of hope. There are lots of good things that we could still do better at.
I've been hearing a lot lately that Reddit seems to have come kind of full circle and is now actually one of the most positively interactive spaces. I don't know if that's true, but it does beg the question if there's still a really positive role for social media, for us as a society, on the platforms that we have, or if that requires building something new with some new form of moderation. And I want to ask.
Actually, I will say just on this, in the intro, you mentioned that we have this hot speech metric, the hateful, offensive, and toxic speech. We actually track each week a basket of news articles, and we get public comments on those same articles on YouTube, on Reddit, and we used to get it for Twitter before they shut down their API access. And then we take all of those comments and we send it to this classifier that marks it as whether it's hateful, offensive, or toxic. And the lowest percentage of hot speech in these comments on the news was on Reddit, and I forget what the order. I think Twitter was in the middle, and YouTube was the worst. I might have those reversed.
So is it time, I'll close with this as we need to wrap up, is it talking about this future of maybe a more positive social media? If that doesn't exist, is it retirable? Is it something we could retire and say this is the end of social media? It has been nothing but trouble?
You're asking, could we or should we?
Either. could. I mean, I think it's a machine, it's a machine that's rolling forward.
The only path I see where that happens is that the platforms just completely lose the battle against AI slop, and nobody wants to use them anymore. But it's not going to be because of some regulation, or it'll just be because people don't like it anymore.
Yeah, we can't. Europe is trying right now with the AI Act, and what they're finding is that the platforms are threatening to leave Europe if they actually enforce regulations against them, and they can do that. And then they know that there's not an elected official who wants to stand by removing social media. So they can't. And I think it is going to they're going to have to change because they're forced to change, and the only people who can force them to change are people. And so, yeah, and it is getting bad, where if you truly just can't go through life believing anything that you see or read, it gets a little frustrating. And I think people will move with their feet eventually. And there's also real harms that are going to come. Democracy is at risk. I think there's violence that is really at risk to the extent it already hasn't already happened. So at some point there's going to be some pushback. I just don't know when.
On that positive note, I hope you'll join me in thanking Roy Austin and Paul Resnick for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And our next event in the series will be on November 11th on the question, should religion play a role in the law? And that'll be at the Union Pendleton Room. All right, thank you.